Boom! Welcome everyone to lesson 2 of This Can Happen. Today's class is going to throw us all for a beautiful ride. So hold on tight to your seats. You may have to halt cup a little bit, which means bear with me. This is going to be, if we were in yeshiva, it might be called a little bit of a pilpul, a little bit of a discussion back and forth. We're going to tie everything together really beautifully at the end. The build-up of this lesson is incredible. It encompasses some of the fundamental concepts that are explained in many hundreds of pages in Chassidus, brought down in a really beautiful way. And my hope is that I'm going to be able to get it across to you, and you're not even going to realize how deep it is. That's my hope. My hope is to simplify it, that it'll make so much sense and be so clear that you won't understand why we needed so many pages to explain it in the books in Hebrew.
And it won't even hurt, huh?
Amen. Okay, question. Is everyone here getting the emails? Did you all get the email with the resources and recording?
Oh, I don't think so.
Okay. If you didn't get that email, then check if it might have gone to promotions or spam, and then see if you can whitelist the email address. And whoever's not here, I guess they probably didn't get the email.
Oh. Well, I got a phone call.
Thank again, and I want all of us to thank and raise our cups if we have a l'chaim with us. If not, we'll say a l'chaim in our mind for Rabbi Lieberman and his wife. Thank them for bringing the scholarships for today's lesson. A big yasher koyach to them. May they have lots of nachas from their children, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren. They should live many happy, healthy years together. And the merit of their bringing the Torah study to people over here should stand them in good stead for now and forever. And let us say l'chaim.
Amen. Amen.
We're going to start with our gratitude. Let's start with Auntie Nina, because you're ahead of us already. What is there to be grateful for tomorrow?
Wow, a whole lot of things because I'm going to start today. Okay, seeing my nephew and my sister and lovely people, I'm looking forward to that.
Okay, thank you. And who wants to go next? Joan, what are you grateful for today?
A very dear cousin of mine called today and told me about something positive about a terrible medical issue she has. And so it was good news, because a certain procedure can be performed to give them information. And that was wonderful news.
Amen.
Beautiful.
Continue
Thank you,
to
Joan.
Shalima.
Yes. Today's Torah learning should be a merit for her, that she should have a complete and speedy recovery.
Amen.
Yes. Amen. Alavai.
Mommy, what are you grateful for today?
Today, I'm grateful for these lovely people here. I'm also grateful to be a part of a nation of Hashem's special people who are endowed with such special, I guess, unique powers of being able to do two opposite emotions at the same time. What happened on Lag BaOmer, everybody knows, and it just showed me we are able to mourn, and at the same time we are able to rejoice. Conflicting emotions. On Lag BaOmer is the most happy day for Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Lag BaOmer has always been a very wonderful, happy day, and we cannot diminish from it. And what happened this last week, we were able to mourn and rise above. And at the same time, we can have these two emotions. And I think it's because we're connected to a higher level of Hashem, where there is no good and there is no bad. Everything is just is. And I feel that remembering a story of Rabbi Meir of Premishlan, There were people who wanted to climb up a mountain, and they couldn't. It was midwinter, and it was slipping and sliding. And he went up every day. There was a pool of water on top of the mountain, and he would break the ice, and he would go to the mikveh there and come down. And people said, how do you do it? They tried to go up, ended up with broken bones. And they said, how do you do it? And this was his answer. If we are connected above, then we cannot fall below.
Mhm.
So
Beautiful.
I'm very, very grateful for that.
Thank you.
Nice
Thank
to
you,
meet
Mommy.
you.
And not Leib Moshe, Mordechai.
Late Mordecai?
I want to see if we can get Leib Moshe on the line. It could be he got caught up with something.
Yeah.
Mordechai, what are you grateful for this evening?
I would say with all the terrible things that are going on in the world, especially in India, I'm very grateful for health and strength and immunity. I don't feel as taking it for granted as I was. You know, there's so many people that are suffering and are sick and are ill at all different levels. So I feel a lot of gratitude to know the difference, to be strong, to have health. Yeah, and it's something not to take for granted.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mordechai.
You're welcome, Rabbi.
Thank you, Mordechai.
You're welcome.
Okay. So much to be grateful for. So much. So many beautiful things to be grateful for our health, for the wisdom that Hashem has given us. And what I'm grateful for today is the words that I've been given, packing such a great concept into such beautiful words. And I'm very excited to get started. So with that, thank you all for coming. And those who are going to be jumping on now, we are going to start. We're going to start with a story, a joke kind of story. And this one is going to be different because your job is going to be to find out how it connects to the lesson. Story is with a man named Yankel. Yankel is our go-to man. And our friend Yankel was born Jewish, but is an atheist. For many years, he's been an atheist. And he's taking a walk through the forest, looking at the magnificent trees, the streams, the leaves, the nature, and thinking about how incredible it is that such a world just came to be by itself and that there's nothing greater or beyond the world. As he's sitting there meditating to himself, connecting with nature, he hears a rustling in the bushes behind him. And he turns around to see a grizzly bear, tall and ferocious, with his arms outstretched, ready to pounce. And Yankel screams, "Oh my God!" And at that moment, the entire world stops. Everything freezes. The bear stops mid-pounce. The trees stop rustling. The leaves stop moving. The birds stop chirping. And a light shone from up high, as if an aperture opened in the sky. And he says, "God, save me. Save me from this bear." And the voice comes out and says, "Yankel, now you're turning to me. After all your life saying that there was no God, after all of your life preaching to people that there could not be an existence of a creator of the world, after all of your life making people stray from my ways, and now when it's your time of need, you all of a sudden turn to me and pray for me to save you?" And Yankel says, "You're right. You're right. It would not be appropriate for me to pray at this time. It would not be appropriate for me to all of a sudden become a believer at my time of need. So God, let me ask of you this. Make the bear a believer." The aperture closes. The world continues. The birds continue chirping. And Yankel looks on at the bear as the bear pauses and puts his hands together in meditation. And after a moment, speaks out. And Yankel is about to breathe such a big sigh of relief until he hears the words coming out of the bear's mouth. "Baruch atah Hashem, Elokeinu melech haolam, Hamotzi lechem min haaretz. The blessing that we make before we eat.
Oh,
Okay. So it's a little bit similar to the story we had last week of the peasant who asked the rabbi to send all the goyim to Israel. But your job today is to figure out, one moment, like Moshe, your job today is to figure out how this lesson is going to connect, how this joke is going to connect with today's lesson. Yes, Mordechai.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I would say, and that was a great story, but in the story, it was easy for him to be an atheist when everything's okay and under control.
That's a great lesson, yes.
It was easy for him to just say, well, there's no God and everything. But when he was in trouble, he didn't call out and say,
I'm sorry, I forgot about this.
nothing, or just help me. The only thing he could call out was to God. Supreme. He wouldn't call out just to the air, so to speak, or just to nothingness.
Right.
Just an atheist.
Thank you again for the pastry. That
On
was
the
so
times
nice.
of need, I think, is when people turn most to God, and that's the acid test, so to speak. The proof.
Beautiful.
The
Thank
proof.
you for joining, Leib Moshe. I'm going to mute you for now. There's some background noise coming from there. So I'm going to put it on mute
I'm
if you
getting
notice
away
anything.
from that sound.
Okay, perfect. And you can turn on your video when you're ready. We're happy to have you here. Okay. Wonderful. Thank you, Leib Moshe, and thank you for being here.
Oh,
So-
by the way, Uncle David sends his regards.
Thank you. It's been a while since I've seen him. So last week we spoke all about the physical things that happen when Mashiach comes, right? When we were a kid, when I was a kid, and old kids are taught this, and you may have heard this also, that when Mashiach comes, candy is going to be growing on trees, right? And where does that come from? Because like we spoke last week from the Rambam, from Maimonides, that when Mashiach comes, all of the physical delights will be plentiful and abundant like the dust of the earth. So one way of explaining that to a kid is that one way of portraying that is candies will be growing on trees, or maybe even money. Yes, Auntie Nina.
Yeah, well, also that food will be coming from the trees. And now that with all these vegetarian meat things that we here in Hobart have to have, it's been a reality for us for quite a while.
Right, so your meat grows on trees.
Yes.
And I just saw this incredible video from Israel where they managed to make a steak out of...
Oh, that's horrible.
Sorry?
It was horrible. I saw it too. It was yucky. I wouldn't eat that.
Oh, it
It
didn't
looked
taste
too
good?
real.
It
No,
looked like
I
they had
didn't
it with the
taste it.
fats and the proteins and everything. Anyways,
Yeah.
so
Sorry.
so that's what we are taught, and that's how things are. And like we spoke last week, how beautiful it would be a world with no poverty, a world with no war, a world with no illness, a world with no disabilities, and how we're slowly but surely moving towards such a world. Today, we're going to take a little bit of a deeper dive, and we are going to zoom out just a little bit. We are going to look at text number 1, and we're going to see the entire clipping from last week. What we read last week was only a portion. Who would like to volunteer to read text number 1 for us? Page number 45.
Can you put it up?
Oh,
So I don't have the PDF over here. Joan, Mordechai.
sure. The King Mashiach is destined to arise and restore the sovereignty of the house of David to its former rule. He will build the temple and gather the dispersed of Israel. In his days, all the Torah's laws will be reinstated. When there arises a king from the house of David who studies Torah and fulfills the mitzvot like his ancestor David in accordance with both the written and oral Torah, he will influence all of Israel to walk in its ways and repair its breaches, and he will fight the battles of God. He is presumed to be the Mashiach. If he does this and is successful, he builds a temple in its place and gathers the dispersed of Israel, then he is definitely Mashiach. He will then improve the entire world to serve God together, as is written. Then I will transform the nations to a pure language, that they will all call upon the name of God and serve him with one purpose. In that era, there will be no famine or war, no envy or competition, for goodness will be in abundance, and all the delights will be as commonplace as dust. The sole occupation of the world will be only to know God. As it is written, the earth will be filled with the knowledge of God as waters cover the sea.
Thank you, Joan.
Thank you.
So what we read just now, what Joan read for us just now, is a much broader picture. And what we spoke about last week is only half of the third paragraph. Half of that last paragraph is the one sentence that we learned last week. And that was the basis of the session. That was the basis of last week's entire class. So let me ask you this question. According to what this new information from reading the entire text of the Rambam, how would you contextualize what we read last week? And how would you contextualize the entire idea of Mashiach?
Could you clarify that a little bit, Rabbi?
It is all good.
Sure.
What do you mean by contextualize what?
So we spoke last week, right, a lot about the physical idea of Mashiach, and that was a concept that we were all very comfortable with. Now,
The improvement of the world.
Sorry?
I'm sorry, the improvement of the world in all different ways.
Yeah. Now,
Right.
Maimonides is going on. If we read the actual full text of the Rambam instead of just the excerpt that we focused on last week, what we see over here is a lot about a spiritual side. Rebuilding of the temple, the sovereignty of the house of David, the ingathering of the exile, all of the Torah laws, everybody making sure that everybody is doing all of the Torah and the mitzvahs. And only then he adds a little sentence about the physical part of the world. So based on what we know now, based on what the Rambam is saying, what is the concept of Mashiach? Is what we learned last week the entire concept of Mashiach? Is what we learned last week a minute detail? Is it half? How would you say, according to Rambam, according to what we learned now from the Rambam, what would you say that Mashiach looks like?
You mean the time of Mashiach?
Yeah. What does the era of Mashiach look like? Thank you for that clarification.
Everyone believes in God and lives according to God's will, to God's hope for us. That it's a perfect world. It's perfect because everyone's in tune with God.
Yeah,
Also, for me, can I say?
please.
Also, for me, it brings, it fleshes out. It makes it brings it into the present. A lot, everything that we've learned about the Beis Hamikdash has been in the past. But now we know that the two are tied together. It's fits in, it dovetails with the past and the future, and the present is making filling in the puzzle pieces that actually we are getting there.
Okay. So thank you for sharing that. And now I'm going to ask you, what do you think about his Mashiach idea? I mean, we were all very comfortable with such a wonderful world, but how do you feel about this idea of a spiritual, religious Mashiach?
It's the only way Mashiach can be perfect.
Okay, so Joan is saying it's the only way Mashiach can be perfect.
I would say if the whole outer world is utopian, then what else is there but spirituality?
Wow. We got a great crowd tonight.
I mean, if all of those, let's just say, problems collectively are taken care of and restored, and there's no more striving, then the only thing left is spirituality and to be more in alignment with the Torah and the mitzvahs. And
Yeah.
doing the work
Okay.
that Hashem wants us to do. I think a lot of us, including myself, we get astray because we get caught up with all the things we have to do in the world to survive and the problems and everything. It's harder to focus more on the loftier or spiritual things.
Yes. Yes, Mordechai. And we're going to get there. And Jonah and Mordechai, you guys are spot on. And I hope that we're going to add a lot more meat to that and a lot more clarity and understanding to that as we go along through today's lesson and through the lessons, also the coming lessons. Mami.
Rabbi Leib Moshe might want to be on the audio. I don't know. We can't hear him. He's muted out. But, there he
Okay,
is.
go ahead, please.
I just turned it on. Thank you.
Did you want to say something, Leib Moshe?
No, but Mark was saying that I was muted and I just unmuted myself.
Okay, great, thank you. Mami, did you have your hand up?
Well, just a little story. This non-Jew came to a Jewish sage and he says, what are you going to do if I don't believe in the Mashiach that you believe in? And the rabbi said to him, the sage said to him, that Mashiach that you don't believe in, I also won't believe in. Because at that time, as we had just read, as Joan so nicely read, the whole world will have a knowledge of Hashem. So we will all be on one wavelength.
Exactly. So the question is, why do we need the spiritual side? And I might be talking for the animal side of myself sometimes. And it could be that some of the inner voice sometimes asks or questions. It may be a question that some other of us have also thought about before, which is, why do we need that physical side? The spiritual idea. Why do we need this whole religious thing? Let's enjoy life. Let's enjoy a life with no disabilities, a life with riches, a life with all worldly pleasures as plentiful as the dust. And who needs the spiritual stuff? Why is that so important? And we're going to see soon that it's not just important, but it's integral. But before we get there, last week we spoke about the advances that we're getting closer to Mashiach. We spoke about science, we spoke about medicine, and sometimes even politicians. We don't speak politics, but sometimes even politicians have helped bring the world towards this place. So, what is Mashiach? Is Mashiach, in order to get Mashiach, do we need some better scientists, some more people working at MIT to figure out these disabilities? Some better politicians? Or is there something godly and spiritual that has to happen in order for the world to be perfect? Is it God or is it science?
I would say without a doubt it has to be God, because we have more technology than ever. We have more knowledge. We have more of everything to the point where it's ridiculous. And it's not necessarily true everything's improving. It just seems more complicated.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I wouldn't say we have better politicians. We just have more politicians.
Okay.
Without going into.
Great. So, what we said so far, to summarize what we've said so far, is we've introduced the concept that Mashiach is not only a physical utopia, not only a beautiful world, a perfect world, but there is a very spiritual component to Mashiach as well, which is the study of Torah, the learning of mitzvahs, bringing sacrifices in the temple. All of that is going to take place, and it is going to be a cornerstone part of Mashiach's arrival and the Messianic era, the Mashiach era. So, let's move on to section number 2. Not only is there this idea that Mashiach is a spiritual thing and that we're not only talking about the physical perfection of the world, Judaism is extremely obsessed with this idea of Mashiach. And let me explain. When I say obsessed, I don't just mean that we think about it from time to time. I mean an obsession. Every weekday, every day we say the prayers, and in every prayer, one of the parts where we say it standing. So if you've ever been into a shul, please rise, you may be seated, please rise, you may be seated. So one of those please rises is the Amidah prayer, the Shemona Esrei. During the weekday, it's comprised of 19 blessings, and that's why it's called the Shemona Esrei, because Shemona Esrei means 18. Yeah, I know there's 19. There's an explanation. There's a reason for that. It used to be 18. Then they added another one, but they kept the name. So it's called the 18. Out of these 19 blessings, no fewer than 7 of them reference requests for Mashiach. 7 out of 19. I'll let the mathematicians make the fraction and percentage, but let's read through some of the excerpts. We're just going to run through it very quickly. Page number 47, text number 2. So in the first one we have, you resurrect the dead, powerful to save. Resurrection of the dead, that is Mashiach. 7th blessing, we ask Hashem to redeem us, behold our affliction and wage our battle and redeem us speedily. The 10th blessing is sound the great shofar for our freedom and ingather the exiles from the corners of the earth. The 11th blessing, restore our judges and in former times, that we should have rulers and judges like we had in the times when Judaism was ruling, that we should have the Torah laws ruling us once again. The 14th blessing, return to Jerusalem, dwell therein, and establish the throne of King David. The 15th blessing, cause the sign of David, your servant, to flourish and increase his power by your salvation. In the 17th blessing, asking for Hashem to bring us back the sacrifices in the temple. So we see 7 out of 19 of the blessings that we're saying 3 times every day, we're asking Hashem to bring Mashiach. That is, I'm not going to say overkill, but it's quite a lot. Let's move further. The rest of the prayers are also very involved. And let's look at some of the daily things that we do. Let's look at the Jewish calendar. So we have our prayers. We have certain things that we do during the mealtime when we wash our hands for bread. That's because we're waiting when Mashiach is going to come. Our hands will have to be pure. Let's look at the Jewish calendar. What are 2 of the most well-attended parts of the year in the Jewish calendar are going to be Ne'ilah, the end of Yom Kippur, and the Pesach Seder. How do we end off Yom Kippur? How do we end the prayers on Yom Kippur? Everyone's in shul. Of course, we end by eating. But before we break our fast, what happens? They take out this big shofar and they blow a blast of the shofar, and everyone says, shofar, show good. Sorry, I had to. And then they scream out all together, L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem. And we don't mean that we should find a good deal on El Al or Delta, though that would be nice as well. But we're saying that next Yom Kippur we should be celebrating in Israel. The Passover Seder. How do we finish the Passover Seder? L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem. Then when we get to the summer, the 3 weeks, the 9 days, celebrating or mourning for, commemorating the destruction of the temple and praying that Hashem should rebuild Israel, rebuild Zion and Jerusalem. Let's look at some of our life cycle events. When a baby is born and we have a bris for a baby boy, we have a special chair for Elijah the prophet. Who's Elijah the prophet? The one who heralds the coming of Mashiach. At a wedding, we say 7 blessings. What's the seventh blessing? That it shall be heard once again in the cities of Judah and the streets of the Jerusalem, the voice of happiness, the voice of joy, that we should be dancing again in Jerusalem. And many people have the custom, raise your hand if you've seen people smashing a glass cup underneath the canopy. Very good. You've been to a Jewish wedding. We're smashing the glass because even at our time of joy, we are mourning the destruction of the temple and hoping that our joy will be complete once again when we're back in Israel with the coming of Mashiach. Sorry if I went through that a little bit too fast, but what we see over here is that all through our days and all through our lives, wait, I missed something. A funeral, many of the things that we discussed in our last course, we spoke about some of the preparatory ways that we prepare the body for the burial, have to do with the resurrection of the dead and the coming of Mashiach. And the traditional comfort blessing that we give to the people is that, remember those 2 letters we quoted from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, saying that just as we have complete faith that Mashiach is going to come and Zion and Jerusalem, the Beis HaMikdash, the temple will be rebuilt, so too there is going to be a resurrection of the dead. So all through life, every life cycle event, all through the holidays, all through our daily prayers, we are talking consistently on and on about Mashiach. Okay, I'm going to surface for air and ask if there's any questions.
So far, so good. I like that.
Okay, so let's look at the Rambam. The Rambam places, we spoke about this actually last week a little bit, that the Rambam places the belief in Mashiach and the resurrection of the dead in his 13 principles of faith. Let's look at figure 2.2 on student page 53. Let's look what Mashiach is up together with on the batting station. Let's look what else is there on the list. Number one, there's a God who is perfect in every way, and there's nothing other than God. Number two, God is absolutely one. Number three, God is not physical. Number four, God is eternal. Number five, you have to worship God, obey his commandments, and not any other power or deity.
Are you frozen?
My sister is frozen.
Yeah, he's frozen, Rabbi.
It's winter. It's winter where my sister is.
Yeah, he's frozen. In Florida.
I've got a blanket.
Rabbis.
Rabbi, he's frozen. Maybe he doesn't hear.
Wow. That's too bad.
Okay, I'm not sure what happened there. Is everyone here?
Yeah, you were
Yeah.
frozen for a while.
Okay. I guess that was the... So, and number 13 is the belief in the resurrection of the dead. So what we have here, when we're talking, the Rambam is codifying the central foundation of Judaism. He says you have to believe in God, you have to believe in the Torah, and you have to believe in Mashiach. If we can break all these 13 principles down into 3 ideas, he says the fundamental facts that you have to believe in, and if you don't believe in this, you don't believe in Judaism, is the God, the Torah, and Mashiach.
Hear that?
So,
And Mashiach.
what we've summarized so far is that Mashiach, this idea that there is a Mashiach, this spiritual Mashiach, both sides actually, Mashiach is so integral to the Jewish belief, and we are extremely obsessive about mentioning and praying for Mashiach at every day and at every milestone in our lives. My question to you is, why are we so obsessed with Mashiach? Okay, so we started today by saying how there's a spiritual component. We spoke about our obsession, and now I'm going to ask you, why are we so obsessed with Mashiach?
This is a good question.
That's a great question. That's why I want to explore it. And I'm going to lead the witness over here, and I'm going to bring you towards an answer that some people have given. And I'm going to lead you there by asking, how has life been for the Jewish people over the last 2,000 years?
Not so good.
To put it mildly.
Generally, not so good.
Yeah, to put it mildly, it's been not so good.
Mildly, yeah.
To put it mildly, it's been not so good. So many have explained that, and we may have even touched upon this last week, that why do we have such a strong obsession with Mashiach? Go ahead.
To make things good.
Yeah, it's a coping
Better.
mechanism. Right? If you
Much
have someone
better.
in jail, they're looking forward to freedom. You have the Jewish people in exile. We're not in charge, right? We don't have complete autonomy over ourselves yet. Complete autonomy we don't yet have. We're still having problems. We're still persecuted. There's still anti-Semites. There's still Arabs. There are still people trying to kill us. So how do we cope? By hoping for a better future. and they bring a proof from the Torah. Let's look at text number 3. They bring a proof from the Torah. Who would like to, Leib Moshe, would you like to read text number 3 for us?
Okay. For 3 days, the soul hovers above the body, thinking that.
Sorry, Leib Moshe, I think that you have the Journey of the Soul book in front of you.
Oh, I was wondering why. It's been a bad night for me, Rabbi. You have to excuse me. My phone went off. I didn't realize the class was starting. I'm a mess.
Don't worry about
Okay.
it. Sounds
Let me
it'll
go
be
get
good.
the other book.
You're here.
Okay, so Leib Moshe is going to grab the other book. Meanwhile, Mordechai, and listen, it's a good thing that we were listening, right? Mordechai,
He was
please
testing-
read
he was
text number 3
testing
for
us.
us while we're...
He was testing us if we were paying attention. God will return your exiles and he will have mercy upon you. He will return and gather you from all the nations amongst whom God has scattered you. If your outcasts will be at the ends of the heavens, from there God will gather you, from there he will take you. God will bring you into the land your ancestors possessed, and you will possess it, and he will do you good and multiply you more than your ancestors. And you will return and listen to the voice of God and fulfill all his commandments.
Thank you, Mordechai, and thank you, Leib Moshe. We see over here in the Torah, possibly, and we're going to learn that that's not actually possible to say this, but they bring a proof from the Torah which says that you're going to go into exile and you're going to be redeemed, which seems to imply that redemption is an answer to exile. Good answer? Good answer. Good proof? Possibly. Leib Moshe, we're on student page 55.
I'm there. Thank you.
Perfect. So, let's look a little bit closer. Let's dig a little bit deeper, because you didn't hire me to tell you that we are only going to be getting back to where we were before. That's not what we're here for, and that's not what you came to hear. We're going to go further, we're going to go deeper, and we are going to explore a fascinating insight into where Mashiach fits into the Jewish belief system. Leib Moshe, would you like to read for us text number 4? Start with text number 4a. We're going to look at one of the first verses in the Bible. It may be first verses in the Torah. It may be very familiar to us, and we will analyze it. Go ahead when you're ready, Leib Moshe. Text number 4a, page 56.
In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was chaotic and desolate, and darkness was on the face of the watery depths, and the Spirit of God hovered upon the waters.
Okay, thank you, Leib Moshe. Before we analyze this, should I share a joke about the subject?
Always.
Okay.
Always like jokes.
So, there were a group of professionals. They were having a Jewish business networking meeting. And they were debating which of their occupations was the first to exist. So the surgeon claimed that surgery was first because God made a surgery and took one of Adam's ribs and made Chava, made Eve. So the anesthesiologist said, well, he couldn't have done that without anesthetic. So the anesthesiology must have come first. The engineer said, well, let's look at this verse. It says that there was chaos and the earth was chaotic and desolate. They must have been engineers to fix up all that chaos. And then the lawyer piped up and said, and who do you think made the chaos? Okay, let's look at this verse. God created the world. Very good. The earth was chaotic and desolate because everything was just there. There wasn't yet the separation of the upper waters and the lower waters. There wasn't yet the separation of dry land. There wasn't yet the creation of the animals. So everything was chaotic and desolate, and there was darkness on the face of the watery depths because there was water, but God had not yet created the sun and the moon, separated the day and the night. And the Spirit of God hovered upon the waters. What does that mean? What is the Spirit of God? And what does it mean that it's hovering upon the waters? So before we move forward, let me ask you, what do you think that means?
sounds like God was separate, was keeping himself separate from what he was doing, from
It
what he was
sounds like God was keeping himself separate. Hold that thought because we are going to get there. Hold that thought. You're speaking very good. God was not satiated in the world. God was abstract, so to speak, and not very infused in the world. Okay, great. Any other ideas?
Well, this was before there was land. So he was looking upon what he had done, what he had created, and then he was getting ready for his next step.
It was
Great.
before there was man.
It's before there was man. It's before there was land. God was contemplating, what am I going to do next? I have a world now. What's the next step? Very good.
I think that Hashem was thinking, should I go ahead with this really?
Yes. Okay. Leib Moshe, would you continue and read text number 4b, which is the explanation of Rabbeinu Bachya ibn Pekuda. We mentioned him a few times last course. You can read his bio in the bottom of the page. Student page 57, text number 4b. There is a famous medrash, which is very confusing, and Rabbeinu Bachya is going to give us an answer.
Want me to read it?
Please.
The meaning of this midrash
So
is
let's start with the Spirit of God, the midrash. So the Spirit of God.
the Spirit of God hovered upon the waters. This is the soul of Mashiach.
So that's what the medrash tells us. And please read us Rabbeinu Bachya's
And the
explanation.
meaning of this midrash is, in this passage, God is foretelling the end at the beginning, as it says in Isaiah 46:10. The Torah's intention is to indicate the end of time at the very beginning of time, to teach us that the ultimate purpose of God's creation of the world is the days of Mashiach. Thus, the original thought is actualized in the conclusion of the work.
Okay. Thank you, Leib Moshe. So that may seem a little deep, and to make us with a little bit less, to take away some of the confusion, I'm going to pretend like I know a lot about baseball. Who here is into baseball? Okay. Anyone here heard of someone by the name of Yu Jarvis? Sorry, Yu Darvish. I'm sorry. Yu Darvish.
Yu
Yu
Darvish.
Darvish.
Yes.
Yu Darvish. Yu Darvish is an incredible baseball player, major league pitcher. But what was his mistake, and what made him what made him go south? What was some of the big mistakes that he made? He is infamously known for tipping his pitches. Right? Now, tipping his pitches doesn't mean giving them extra money because they did a good job. Tipping his pitches, and Leib Moshe can correct me if I'm wrong, means there's different kinds of pitches you can make. A fastball, a slow ball, a curveball, going up, going down, and all different kinds of pitches. And the kunz of a good baseball pitcher is if you can make your pitch without the hitter knowing what's coming. Yu Jarvis tipped his pitches, which means that they could tell from the way he was moving his body to prepare himself for the pitch, they knew what was coming. That a good explanation, Leib Moshe?
Yes, it's fair enough.
Okay, so here is God tipping his pitches in the first verse of creation. God is tipping his pitches, and God is telling us the reason I created this world is for the Spirit of Mashiach. And like we're going to expound, and like Joan said, the Spirit of Mashiach was not yet infused and invested in the world. And the purpose of creation is that that Spirit should no longer hover on top of the world, but the Spirit should be involved and invested in the world. What does that mean? Hang tight with me.
May I ask a question,
By the way,
Rabbi?
Please.
God throws a lot of curveballs.
May I ask a question?
Please.
If God is creating everything and taking care of everything, then why do we need Mashiach, so to speak, as an intermediary?
Very good,
not to
Mordechai. You
sound-
asked $1 million question.
Oh, okay. Not to sound not proper, so to speak, in terms of Mashiach. But why do we need that intermediary is really my question
Okay,
for the world. Okay.
very good. I'm going to ask you to hold that for a moment. We're going to build this question a little bigger, and then we're going to come and ask it, okay? Let's look at figure 2.3. It's a beautiful recap of what we've said so far. We've said that the Mashiach is central to Jewish prayer and practice. This is on student page 58. It's a central pillar of the Jewish faith. It predates exile. It's not a response to our nation's displacement or our historic suffering and persecution. It was foretold even before exile was foretold, and it predates the creation of the world. So Mashiach is not only an answer to exile, not only is it not an answer to exile, Mashiach predates the creation of the world, which means that the end of days, the Messianic era, Mashiach, whatever term you want to call it, is not apocalyptic gloom like some cults and religions want to believe. The Messianic era is our destination. Mashiach is the destination of the world.
How about goal rather than destination?
Beautiful. Mashiach is our goal. Mashiach is the goal from the beginning of creation.
Perhaps the purpose?
The purpose of creation. Yes. What we are looking to achieve and what we are looking to accomplish. So,
I ask you a question.
please.
It says that the Mashiach predates the creation of the world. Is the Mashiach an entity that's in heaven with God?
That's a great question, and I hope that the next few minutes are going to answer that question. If they don't, please ask again.
Okay.
So, now we get to Mordechai's question. If the reason Hashem created this world is for a time when there is no war, no strife, no famine, no hunger, no evil, and no violence, a world where there is an abundance of all things good, a world where there is no jealousy, no hatred, a world where people are studying the Torah, doing the mitzvahs, bringing sacrifices in the temple, and involved only in the knowledge of God. Pray tell me, why didn't he create it that way?
When that happens, Mashiach will come.
Yeah. So if that was why Hashem created the world, because that's what he wants a world which is a Mashiach world, a world which is a Messianic era, a world which is a beautiful, perfect world in physical and in spiritual. Why didn't he create it like that?
Because we are children, and like children, we need to grow and to learn and to grow into our maturity.
Okay. But I'm going to ask you like this. Let's give an example. If you want to build your dream home, you think about how it looks. So you're going to figure out what it looks like. Now, if you want to actually build that, you're going to have a host of workers, architects, designers, planners, and maybe in a few years' time, it'll look the way you want it to. That's not how God is. God, as soon as he has a vision of it, it's there. So if God had a vision for a Mashiach world, if God had a vision for this Messianic era, why didn't he just create it like that? It wouldn't have cost him any more.
Because it's more beautiful when it's attained.
Because it's more beautiful when it's attained. Joan, great, incredible. And let's look at that.
Yeah.
Froze again.
I'm here, Auntie Nina. Were you trying to say something?
You froze.
No, he's okay.
I'm not frozen. Oh, now we see you again. Would you like to try saying that again?
Joan said about our efforts. It has to come through our effort.
It does. Yes, so it has to come through our efforts. And the question is why?
We have to earn it. We have to feel really involved in it, and not just, players like on a chessboard or whatever.
I guess it's also like children. They have to grow and learn and evolve.
Okay, so what I'm hearing from everyone is
Yeah.
that we need to be a part of the process. And in order for us to feel good about it, we need to work for it.
Yeah.
Question is, why do we need to be involved? Why do we need to be a part of it? Why do we need to be active players?
Well, we were created. We need to feel that it is part of us.
But why?
We're not,
Yeah, why couldn't God have just made it that way? Well, I don't
because then
need-
we'd be robots. We'd be robots. We wouldn't be human beings. We wouldn't have all those attributes that Hashem wants us to grow. We'd be growing like, just automatons.
Great. So that's the question. Why did Hashem create us as human beings and not like robots? So let's move in. And this is going to be the final step of the journey. So I know we've asked a lot of questions today and we haven't answered any of them, but we're making a scaffolding. We're making like lining up our dominoes. And when the last one fits into place, it's going to be like Tetris and everything's going to come crashing down to the bottom. Okay? So our question is, this final leg of the journey, our question is, to answer everything, we are going to have to turn to the mystical side of Judaism. We've spoken from halacha. We've spoken from Jewish law. We've spoken from the philosophers. Now we're going to have to turn to the mysticism. We're going to have to turn to the mysticism to answer this question. This question is, why did Hashem create us like this? Why did Hashem want us to be involved? Leib Moshe, don't worry, you haven't missed anything. We are going to turn to Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, the Alter Rebbe, and we're going to quote from Tanya, which is sometimes called the Bible of Hasidism. And we are going to look at the reason for creation of the world. In the Alter Rebbe's words, Mordechai, we haven't heard from you yet this evening. Page number 60.
61? Oh, 60. As is known, the sages have said that the purpose of the creation of this world is that God desired that they should have a home in the lowly world. It is also known that the days of Mashiach, and especially the time of the resurrection of the dead, are the fulfillment and culmination of the creation of the world, of this world, and the purpose for which it was originally created.
Okay, very good. So that just explained to us what we've said before and crystallized it in beautiful words, that the reason why God created the world is because he wanted a home in the lowly world, and that's the purpose of creation. And if you want to continue, the same thing is in text number 6.
This is what the human being is all about. This is the purpose of the human being's creation and of the creation of all the worlds, both the lofty and the lowly, that God should have his home in the lowly world.
Okay, thank you.
I'll have this home in the lowly world.
Exactly. So we have over here, number 1, the purpose of creation is to make the world a home for God. We're going to discuss that soon. Before we get there, I want to ask you, why lowly world? Okay, so we have higher worlds and lower worlds. We have holiness and we have physical worlds. But why besmirch it? Why call it a lowly world?
Why would God even want to be in the lowly world?
Very good. And what even is a lowly world?
Right here.
Where godliness is hidden.
Where godliness is hidden. Very good. We're going to skip number 7 for now. We're going to get back to text number 7. Turn to page 65 and look at figure 2.4. What you see over here is a circle with 4 different levels, which are the 4 Kabbalistic worlds, the 4 worlds which are spoken about in Kabbalah, You see Atzilut, Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya, the world of emanation, creation, formation, and finally the world of action. 4 worlds that are spoken about. What these worlds are, and what they mean is beyond the scope of this class. We're going to launch a Kabbalah and coffee class where we can speak more about it. For today, what's important is number one, that we are living in Asiya. Number two, we're going to ask, what does it mean, a higher world? What does it mean, a lower world? Do you take a rocket ship to get from Asiya to Yetzirah? Is it like chutes and ladders where you have ladders going up and down?
I think it's a metaphor for higher.
Oh,
It's
very
not-
good. We're
it's not
talking
literal.
about a metaphor for higher and lower. And what does it mean? A higher
I-
world, all
here-
of the worlds are... Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I think spiritually it means a higher world.
Very good.
Closer to God.
Very good. So, what it means is, you just reminded me of a question. There's, in Kabbalah, in Kabbalistic terminology, for all those who are familiar, there's a concept called lights and vessels. Lights means God's spirituality, and the vessels are the concealment. Anyways, I was once speaking to a Rosh Yeshiva, a head of a yeshiva, who said one Sunday, one of the local business owners came with a bag of light bulbs. And he said to the rabbi, he says, I don't know, one of your boys came on Friday and he was explaining to me about the lights and the vessels crashed, and then the lights went everywhere, and then, so we need to fix the vessels. So I figured you guys need new light bulbs. So here's some. Obviously, we're not talking about physical higher and lower. God's revelation is everywhere the same. God is everywhere equally. What is different is how apparent it is to us, how apparent it is to the creations. They're all just as close to God as each other. The only difference is how well do we recognize God. To give you an example, let's say there are two rooms next to each other. One of them is full of 20 physicists, teachers in universities. The next room, you have 26-year-olds. I'm going to ask you two questions. Question number one, in which room is E equals MC squared true?
In both.
In both. E equals MC squared is true in both rooms.
Everywhere.
In which room is E equals MC squared apparent? In which room is E equals MC squared the driving force for everything that happens? In which room is it a reality? In which room is that all they're occupied with? In which room is it a subject of conversation?
The engineers.
The engineers, the philosophers, the scientists. That's how it is with these four worlds. God's existence is everywhere. The question is, how well do we recognize it? This lowly world means a world that God created where we wake up in the morning and we see ourselves. We wake up in the morning and we don't see God. That is this lowly world. That's what it means, a lowly world, where he's not apparent. Aha! Now you get where we were started with? Remember that joke about the atheist? A world in which atheists can exist. A world in which you can look around and see nothing but trees and grizzly bears.
Mm.
We wake up in the morning, we don't think, how can I serve God? God is not the most obvious thing to me. When we have a decision, the truth is not always what's most obvious to us. That's what it means, a lowly world. A world where God is not obvious. A world where we don't recognize God.
Well, in the case of the atheist, he never made it a point to recognize God.
True.
Theoretically, if he's an atheist, then he didn't do anything. He didn't pray. He didn't read. He didn't.
That's right. And that's what we're here for. God created humankind. Remember text number 6, God created the humans. And text number 5, God created the world because he wanted a world which was void of his obviousness. A world in which his spirit will only hover over the earth. And for us to work hard and make it into a godly world. Make it into a world where God's being is obvious and apparent. When we do Torah, when we do mitzvahs, I'm jumping ahead of myself a little bit. God wanted to create a world in which he would not be obvious. His existence would be hidden, and we would work hard to find him.
I suppose that really can't ask all the questions because we're limited. We can't just ask, well, why did he want that? Because he just did.
On the one hand, yes. On the other hand, we're going to soon explain why it's possible. Why that was his desire.
Not why it's possible. Ah, the desire. Okay.
Why it's possible
the
for him to desire
possibility.
that.
Anything is possible for Hashem, but why?
Exactly.
Why this? Why this possibility?
Yep.
Okay.
So, the Baal Shem Tov, who was the founder of Hasidus in general, he sometimes said that the world is like a game of hide and seek. God created the world, covered himself with a curtain, and said, "Come find me if you can." That's what this world is, a game of hide and seek. So, to summarize, what we said so far in this section is that Hashem created a world which was not perfect, a world in which he was hidden, and he created us to change that. He created us so that we can find him. He created us so that we can make his existence obvious and clear to all.
It seems like a lot of striving for thousands of years to make that happen.
Yeah.
You know,
It
millions
is.
and millions of people are Jewish and non-Jewish to make that happen for the world.
Yeah. It's a long process, and in lesson number 4, we're going to look at the entire history and see how it's come.
Are we far
Before we
away
move
from
forward.
completion?
And we're almost there.
Okay.
We're almost there. Let's wait a moment to see. Leib Moshe just entered again. Let's wait a moment to see if he'll pop on. Then we'll give him a quick recap and move forward to this last point. Leib Moshe, do you hear us?
Now I do. I was having problems with my phone.
Okay, so let's give a quick recap for Leib Moshe, and you can catch up the details on the recording. Hopefully it'll go out tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
The quick recap is that Hashem created a world which was void of his apparency. A world in which it's not obvious that God exists. A world which we can have atheists. A world where we wake up in the morning and we don't think about God. And he created this world in order that human beings, by their own efforts, should come to recognize Hashem and should make it his existence obvious to the entire world. There we go. 2 sentences. Not bad. But why? Let me ask you. If you knew someone who had all the money in the world, they were happy, they had a good life, a good marriage, wonderful children, lots of nachas, they had everything they needed in life, what would you get them as a gift?
I would suggest what they can, I would suggest what they can do to give back to the world and what areas that are in need. There's nothing else left. And you see it today, sometimes very wealthy people like the Gates, Oprah, they give millions and millions to help other nations and people because there's nothing else left to do but mitzvahs, good deeds, humanitarian things.
Okay, so if you wanted to give them a gift, what would you give them?
Suggestions of where to help.
Suggestions of where to
Thank
help.
you.
Okay.
I would just thank them.
Okay. What kind of presents could you give? So really, and I think that this is what Mordechai is touching on,
My
is
thanks.
that, sorry?
Well, our thanks, you know, our recognition of them as you know, as human beings and being part of their life. I know they've got the children, they've got everything, but that's just their family. They need, maybe they need more than just family, close family. So giving them love, don't worry about even, yeah, okay, so we thank them, but don't make that the relationship so much. This is with humans I'm talking about.
Okay, we can have a positive relationship with them.
Give them a Torah.
Teach them Torah. Very good. So what we could do is we could only give them things that they desire, because they don't need anything. So Hashem is perfect, right? And if Hashem is perfect, what's the one thing that he doesn't have?
Perfect children.
Imperfection.
He's got
Imperfection
it.
is the one thing that Hashem doesn't have. But for him to be really perfect, he has to also be able to have imperfection, but that's a little bit too philosophical for us.
Oh,
So,
wow.
the one thing that Hashem wanted, the one thing that Hashem desired, was imperfection and struggle.
Oh,
Why?
And the way he does that is through us, by creating us, putting us into a world full of struggles and temptations, where godliness is concealed, and having us struggle our way and climb step by step out of that pit. That's what God wanted. And that's why he didn't create the world perfect. Because if he created the world perfect, there's no point in creating the world. The whole reason he created a world is for the struggle.
Mm.
The whole reason he created a world is for beings to wake up in the morning thinking only about
Same way the Ani.
themselves, and to get out of that, to move forward further. Like Auntie Nina said, to say Moida Ani, to thank God, to recognize that there's a God who put us here. And that is beauty. The only thing, to put it in different words, the only thing that Hashem can't do himself and can't make himself is to have others find him. If he would have created a world which was utopian, he would not have had others, and they would not have been able to find him. By creating us, giving us free choice, we are able to have that connection with him, where we are separate from him, reconnecting. To quote some modern terminology, to create a world full of people who are not woke about godliness, and through our own efforts to become woke, and to make a woke world, where we think about God, we dream about God, we sleep with God, we wake up with God, we eat with God. Everything that we do is with godly intention. So, this spiritual awareness is not a second dimension of Mashiach. It's not an added thing that because the world is going to be perfect, there's no hunger and no strife. All we'll have to do is spiritual pursuits. No, that's not what the spiritual side of Mashiach is. The spiritual side of Mashiach is the whole point of creation. Should we say that again?
Otherwise, there's no sense in the creation at all then, right?
Yeah.
I mean, God doesn't need us to do anything in the creation. I mean, he could do everything.
Let's repeat that again.
Yeah.
I'm going to try and use a little bit of different words. So maybe the same words. This idea, the spiritual side to the coming of Mashiach, is not an added thing to the utopian era. It's not that the world will have peace. Everyone will have everything they need. So we're going to be bored unless we're learning Torah, doing mitzvahs, and bringing sacrifices. That's not the spiritual side of the Mashiach. The spiritual side of the Mashiach, where everybody has one clear vision, that there is a God who created the world, that there is a God that we want to connect to and have a relationship. That was the entire purpose for the creation of this world. That is why God created the world to begin with. Our job is to heal the world, to make the physical in line with the spiritual, to make that Spirit of God that was hovering, to make that Spirit of God that was hovering above the world, to make it fused, embodied, one with the world. That's our job. And all negative comes because there's a disconnection from source with a capital S. Any hate, any anger, any evil, any disability, any danger, any violence, any crime, any lack comes because the world is not in tune with its spiritual side. It's not in tune with God. So when we make the world back closer to God, we are healing the world. And if you're going to ask me, does that mean that I'm saying that as we learn more Torah and do more mitzvahs, as we make the world closer to God, as we bring this godly awareness more tangible into the world, that the scientists, that the medicines, that the politicians are going to get closer and closer to that as well? I will answer you yes. Any positive physical change in the world comes because of the spiritual. And how do we get to this physical side? How do we get to this physical utopia that we spoke about last week? By focusing on the spiritual, by advancing the spiritual, by making this world a world where godliness is apparent and recognizable. And that is Mashiach. At that point, we have fulfilled the purpose of creation. At that point, our entire existence is validated, and all negative, all evil disappears.
And
Yes,
Mordechai, didn't Mordechai ask why the person of Mashiach is necessary when we're just talking about the era of Mashiach?
Thank you for that clarification. So to address that, Mordechai, as Mashiach as an intermediary, I thought that you were asking Mashiach as an intermediate concept between us and God.
I was.
If you were asking about Mashiach, the person,
Well, now you're frozen.
if you're asking about Mashiach, the person, we're going to speak more about in, I believe, lesson number 5.
Well, let me ask you: is Mashiach in the form of a human being?
So there's
And
both.
if so,
There's the time of Mashiach and there's the person of Mashiach. The person
Okay, so-
Mashiach is the one who is going to lead us to that time.
right, but okay. So if that's the case, that's my question. Why would we need an intermediary between us and God, being Mashiach?
Okay.
He's a teacher. He's a teacher.
Yes, he is a teacher.
Okay.
He's the one that we spoke about in the Rambam that's going to wage the battle of God. And we're going to learn all the details about Mashiach in number 5.
Okay.
Lesson 5.
Thank you.
you, Antonina, for bringing up that clarification. Okay. So, how beautiful it is that we have text number 7 to summarize this point. Let's turn back to page number 63. And I'm going to read this. Now, in regard to God, the distinctions of higher and lower do not apply, as God pervades all realms of existence equally. The explanation of the matter is as follows. Before the world was created, God was exclusively and singularly one. He pervaded the entire quote-unquote space. Obviously, we're not talking spatial, but we're talking conceptually, in which he created the world. Insofar as God is concerned, it is still the same now. The change brought about by the divine act of creation relates only to those on the receiving end of the vitality and energy that God infuses into creation, which they receive by the many garments that conceal and obscure the divine radiance, as it is written, for no human can see me and live. This is the concept of Hishtalshalut, the downward descent of the worlds, level after level, by means of the multitude of garments that conceal the energy and vitality that emanate from God. Don't worry if these terminologies are a little physical and a little obscure. For that, we can have Kabbalah classes to explain each of these terminologies. But for the general gist, let's keep on going. Until this physical and materialistic world was created, which is the lowest in degree, of which there is none lower in regard to the concealment of God's radiance. This is a world of doubled and redoubled darkness, to the extent that it is full of unholiness, namely, elements that actually oppose God, declaring, I am, and there is nothing else besides me.
The atheist.
Clearly, the purpose of the Ishtalshalut of the worlds and their descent, level after level, is not for the sake of the higher spiritual worlds, as they constitute a descent from the radiance of the divine presence. If the purpose was for spirituality, God is much more spiritual than any spirituality. Rather, the ultimate purpose of creation is this lowest world. For such was God's desire, that he should derive satisfaction. Now here, listen carefully. That he should derive satisfaction when the forces opposing godliness are overcome, and when darkness is transformed into light. The result is that the infinite radiance of God is revealed within this physical world, the place of darkness and the opposing forces, with the advantage of light that comes from the darkness, with an even greater intensity than its revelation in the higher worlds. God wanted a place which is dark, in which human beings, by their own efforts, make it light. So, Mashiach comes when this world is so saturated with Hashem's knowledge, just as saturated as God himself is so obvious to himself. And when that happens, not only is God's knowledge apparent, but it's so much brighter and so much sweeter. It's so much sweeter because we, others, separate entities, through our own choice, have made it happen. And it's so much brighter because it's coming preceded by darkness.
There's
Any
something-
questions?
There's a piece here that just hit me as illogical, because if God is the greatest and most perfect, then he could have created the perfect light without creating us in the darkness to achieve the light.
And I'm going to throw you for a loop over here, that the way he does that and the way he could achieve that is by creating us.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so to explain that with a little bit more words, and I hope that this will explain it better, is that Hashem could create a light that comes through darkness, but only by creating it through darkness. And that's what he did.
Oh,
In other words, a light that
Don't
comes
worry.
preceded by darkness has to be preceded by darkness.
but that's saying that the light itself cannot be the most brilliant light, that it needs the dark.
Well, you need both to know darkness. You have to know darkness to know light.
That's a concept that I never agreed with. I
Like
always thought
It's a
it could be good,
it's a
better,
good
and
question, Joan.
Like-
And
Can
I
I-
think that go ahead, Auntie Nina.
Okay, now I just want to say there is such a thing as a light, which wasn't preceded by darkness, but not in this physical world. What you're talking about, John, does exist on the angelic, in this, as it comes down, there's lots of light. And here, to make us appreciate that the contrast and the work, but light does exist on its own, beautiful angelic light, but we're not there, and we don't want to be there. Hashem is in us.
Yes.
He's in the angels too, but they're so overawed with God, they can only do what they're, like almost like they're automatons. We are not. It is difficult. It's almost paradoxical. I don't understand it, but sometimes I get an inkling. Sometimes. Really, really. But I know it's possible.
There's an age-old question, which is, can God create a stone that he can't lift? The question that,
And the answer is it doesn't want to.
the answer is, well, the real answer is he did.
Hmm.
The laws of nature. The laws of nature are the stone that he can't lift, but when he wants to, he could lift it also.
Right.
Yes, yes.
Well, he created it, so he certainly.
Anyways, I think we're getting a little too philosophical. Thank you, Antonina, for jumping in there. The point is that I want to make sure that we're clear on is that the reason Hashem created the world to begin with is in order that there should be others, beings with their own desires, with their own feelings, with their own experiences that will climb past all of the obstacles and reveal God in the world, come closer to God, and make the world a godly place. So that's what we're working towards, Mashiach. Mashiach, now we can answer all the questions we asked. Mashiach is not an answer to exile. Exile is something that helps us get closer to Mashiach. Spirituality, the spiritual side of Mashiach, is not something that's an addition to the physical part of Mashiach. It's the whole reason for creation. And this also answers, why did God create the world? What's the human purpose? What's the purpose of creation? Why are we doing here? Excuse me. Are there any questions about that point of God creating the entire world in order for Mashiach to come as a result of our efforts? Okay, beautiful. So now comes the question, what are our efforts and how do we bring Mashiach? How do we do that? We have it clear now. World was created in order for human beings to, through their efforts, bring Mashiach. But what's that middle step? What are our efforts and how do we bring Mashiach? And for that, you're going to have to stay tuned for next week. Superhuman or superhumans? Our efforts and how our work brings Mashiach. What our work is. I'm going to give you a sneak preview. I'm going to give you a short answer. The two-word answer is Torah and mitzvahs.
Okay. We'll take your word for it.
I could hardly wait.
Good.
In the meanwhile, we should be doing Torah and mitzvahs while we're waiting.
Exactly.
Okay, that's right.
Another beautiful analogy that I was just reminded of, and this is something that I was able to relate to. I spent a month on a camp which was called Ranch Camp. We did a lot with horses. The ground chip was a cattle drive where we took a bunch of cows through the woods, across the roads, and from one place to another place, all on horseback. We slept outside, we camped. It was tremendous. And at the end of that, I came to appreciate something that I never understood. Why is it that people have emotional connection with horses that they don't have with their cars? At the end of that, I felt a connection with my horse. The horse knew that as soon as I moved in a certain way, it was time to go faster. If I moved a little differently, it was time to go slower. I would talk to my horse. I felt, a certain kind of affection for my horse. And I was thinking about it. And I thought, well, my car gets me places and the horse gets me places. What's the difference?
It was a Jewish horse.
And here's the answer. My car is a robot. I press the button, I turn it on, I put in the key, whatever kind of car you have, and I go. The horse wants to sit and eat. The horse wants to have fun.
It's living.
It's living. It has its own desires. The horse is not interested in going fast past a puddle of water when it's thirsty because one of the cows is about to go up the hill. The horse is not interested in going down a steep incline, all of rocks. And I never seen this in the. I didn't realize that it actually is like that in nature, where you have, like sometimes almost like gravel, but with bigger rocks. And we were going. It must have been a steep incline, probably something like that.
Creek. Yeah.
Its back feet were staying on the ground, and it was almost like skidding down. It was pawing with its front feet to keep its footing and sliding with its back feet. I'm telling you, that was uncomfortable. It would have much rather go up the mountain and go down the grass on the other side. But there was a cow over here that needed to be tended to. And I told the horse to go there, and it followed directions and it listened. And that's why it meant so much, because it has its own desires, but it listened to mine. It listened to my instructions, even though it didn't want to. It just wanted to go to sleep. It just wanted to have a nice apple or hay or carrots. And that's what it is with Hashem and Mashiach. It means so much because we are quote unquote separate, yet we are realizing that there is more than our own desires. And we are doing what Hashem wants instead of what we want. And how does that fit into the fact that we are just a part of Hashem? How can we call ourselves others if we are just a portion of Hashem? That we are going to leave for another session. So thank you everyone for joining. And we're going to go around and ask everyone, what was your major breakthrough today's session? What was your major point that you took away? What did you enjoy most from today's lesson?
Well, I'd say I'm in awe, and I feel like I couldn't recite it to you, but I feel like I have a better understanding of the relationship between God and Mashiach, and why do we believe so strongly in Mashiach and what it's all about. It answers the purpose of creation. And I think for me, it's important because amongst all the strife, it gives us perspective above and beyond that we experience in the world every day.
Yeah.
It's more of a global cosmic kind of viewpoint, so to speak.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful, Mordechai. So it's explained why Mashiach is up there in the 13 principles of the Rambam, together with belief in God and belief in the Torah. Thank you, Mordechai.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Who wants to go next?
All right. For me, the whole thing is kind of fitting into my life, and that I've learned about Mashiach and the Karbonos and things, but they kind of I haven't internalized it. It's up here instead of here, and I think that's happening gradually with the way you are teaching us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Auntie Nina. Who wants to go next? Joan.
Yeah, well, I keep fighting things in a way. There's a piece of it that I get and I feel and I accept, and then I don't get. So I'm working on it.
Yeah.
And I lately just decided to believe, because I was agnostic for years. And I've decided, it feels better to believe. So a piece of this still I'm working on because I want logic. And but I can feel some of it too. So, thank you.
Incredible.
For my journey.
Incredible. Beautiful. Journey of Mashiach. Last was Journey of the Soul. Now it's the Journey of Mashiach. And questions are gold. In Judaism, questions are not only welcomed, but questions are what make up our religion. The entire Seder night is revolving around questions. We learn the most when we ask questions, when we challenge, chew it over, and come to an understanding. So thank you, Joan and Mami.
Okay, so I learned something deep from a joke. When that bear made a bracha or eating, his nature was changed. A bear does not pray. If a living bear can pray, how much more so could I pray? So it was quite a deep lesson, actually. Thank you.
Wow. Beautiful.
Mhm.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you all for your questions, for your insights, and for your engagement.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Wishing you
next
a
week.
happy, safe, and enjoyable week with lots of mazel and bracha. And we will see you next week on Wednesday night at 8 p.m.
Right.
Or Thursday morning at 10 a.m.
Next
All the
Thursday.
best.